So, hello! In this tutorial, I am going to show you how to make a camera in Scratch. So what is the theory behind making a camera? Well, you first need a camera X variable and a camera Y variable. You also need an object X variable and the object Y variable. So the object X and Y variables are the world positions for the sprite. And the camera X and Y variables is the world position for the camera X and Y. So, what do you set the X and Y to? Well, you need to set the X to object X minus camera X. And you need to set the Y to object Y minus camera Y. So let's code that up. So, events. When green flag clicked. Variables. You can remove this my variable and make a variable. Call it camX and make it for all sprites. Click OK. Make another variable called camY for all sprites and make another variable called X, and this is the object X, and make this for this sprite only, and another one called Y for this sprite only. So let's start by setting the camera X to 0 and setting the camera Y to 0, and we can also set the X to 0 and the Y to 0. Then we need a forever loop, so control forever. And now motion, go to XY. So in here we have the math operators, 2 minuses in each one, and variables X minus camera X and Y minus camera Y. So if we show this cam X and cam Y variables and we right click them and choose slider. Now if we start the project, if we change this cam X to 100, the cat moves to negative 100. You can think of it like when the camera moves right, the world moves left. It's because of relativity. And we can also change this start in X and Y, for example Y 100. This makes so the cat is at Y 100. But if we change camera Y to 100, it's in the middle. Because both the cat and the camera is at Y 100. Understand? Good. We can set back this Y to 0. And we can make this a little bit more fun by taking off this X and Y part, control. When I start this clone, we do this, set the X and Y, and forever go to the XY. Now we go to looks, and in the clone we show, and at the green flag we hide. So if we go into control, repeat 10, create clone of myself, and here in the set XY we can go to operators and pick random between minus 1000 and 1000. And this maybe seems a bit big, but if you think about it, now when we can move the camera, we can move much longer distances. So we can copy this pick random to the Y also. So if we start now, we have a couple problems. First of all, we can't move our camera as much as we want to, and the cats are sticking to the edge, and if you look closely, it takes a little bit before the cats appear. Let's start with the cats appearing slowly problem. The reason why this repeat block is slow is because Scratch always thinks we are trying to animate something. So to make this go fast, we need to make a custom block or a function. So make a block, we can call it spawn. And we can add a number input called hash. And now, here, run without screen refresh. Tick that box. This means that it will run instantly. Click OK. Drag this hat block here. We can drag this repeat under the hat block. And this hash, we can drag that into the repeat. So if we drag this spawn block under the green flag, we can set this number input to 10 or even 100. And now if we start, the cats come instantly. But now the cat's sticking to the edge problem. This is because Scratch limits sprites to the edge of the screen so we don't lose them. But in this case, we want to lose them. So we can fix this by going into costumes and creating a new costume. Zoom out and just make a giant square as big as you can. Why do we do this? Well, big sprites can move more off screen than smaller sprites. So if we go back in the code and here at the go to XY, before we set costume to costume 3, that is the big costume, and then after it's done, we can switch it back to the first costume. This tricks Scratch into moving them beyond the edge. So now we can move around the camera X and Y, look at the cats. But now, our third problem. We can't move the cam X and Y. For this, we just need to add some controls. So go into variables, change cam X and change cam Y by, this is a cool trick you can do to make the code smaller. Operators, multiply in both. And this other value, we can set it to 10, for example, in both. And in this first slot, we can set a minus block. And in here, we can go into sensing and then key, right arrow. And we can actually put this inside of the number input. So what does this do? Well, this converts the true or false to a 1 or a 0. And if we do right arrow minus left arrow, then we get 1 if we press the right arrow, 0 if we don't press anything, and minus 1 if we press the left arrow. We can copy this into the camera Y here also, but instead of right and left, we do up and down arrow. And this multiply by 10 just makes it so it's 10, 0, negative 10 instead of 1, 0, negative 1. So it's a bit faster. Control, we can put a forever loop below the spawn block, and we can put this change cam X, change cam Y in there. If we start the project now, we can move the camera with the arrow keys. You can also use the WASD keys if you're more comfortable with that. So now you can move the camera around. That's awesome. So now let's say we want to add some zooming. So how do we do a zooming camera? Well, you just multiply what we already have, object X minus camera X and object Y minus camera Y, and you just multiply it by camera zoom. And camera zoom doesn't really work as our other variables because 100 is actually 100 times smaller. Think of it as 1 is no zoom, 2 is double zoom in, and 4 is 4 times zoom in. For example, 0.5 is a 2 times zoom out. Do you understand? Good. So let's code that up. So, variables. Make a new variable. Call it cam zoom for all sprites and click OK. You can show this variable right now, and in the start at this green flag we set camera zoom to 1, and in this go to XY you add a divided. So why do we add a divided instead of a multiply? Well, this is your preference, but I choose divided because that makes 0.5 a zoom out and 2 a zoom in, and I just think that is more logical. So go to variables, camera zoom, put that on the right side. You can just duplicate this and put this on what we already have. So it should look like this. So now we're done. Press play, and oh, we need to be able to change this camera zoom. So right click it, slider. If we look at this, this is too big of a slider. So we need to change slider range, and minimum is 0.1 for example, and maximum is 10. And if we have a 0.1 here, what do you think will happen? Well, the slider is now going to be able to run decimals. So if we start, we zoom out. Well, it looks a bit weird. Why does it do that? That's because we are not changing the size yet. So it will look a bit weird. So let's go into looks, set size to, and we can do this after we set to the normal costume. Because if it's the big costume, then the big costume will get very small. Because Scratch limits the size as well as the position. So we set size to operators, divided. This can also be multiply. We go into variables, cam zoom on the right side. And on the other side, we set, well, 100, because that's the original size. You can also make a variable called size if you want, for this sprite only. So let's change the zoom here and... well, it works, but I actually want it zooming in instead of out. I made the wrong choice, but that's okay, you can just switch it. I have some dev tools so I can do it a bit faster, but if you don't have that, you can just switch it. Now if I start, then it's what I want. And this also works in here, because if you zoom out a lot, then the camera X moves a lot more slowly. And that's true, because if we start here, this is the position X240, but if we zoom out, around here is the position 240. That is why the camera X and Y is moving slowly, because we just shrinked down the world, and then we shrinked down the camera X and Y also. You can also counter this by multiplying the camera X and Y with camera zoom. So let's show that. So multiply in both of these. We choose camera zoom times 10. So this will make it so we can move. If we zoom out, wait, we are moving slowly. Alright, we need to divide because we are multiplying here. So let's choose divide and start. So now we don't really move at all. That's because we have it in the wrong order. Multiplies don't have an order, but divisions have an order. So we need to have 10 first. So let's start. We zoom out. It's the exact same speed as if we zoom in. Ta-da! And now we're done. So now, let's say you want to add some rotation. Well, this code is a bit more complicated, and I don't think you're going to understand it or want to understand it. So I just recommend going with it and don't bother with understanding it. Well, first of all, let's make a variable called camdir, or direction, for all sprites. Click OK, and here in the start we set camdir to 0. And the reason we have 0 here instead of 90, that's because it's easier for the camera to be 0 and all the sprites to be 90 instead of the other way around. So now let's make the really complex and boring code. So first of all, we take out these two and we do a minus in both and the multiply in all of them, like this. Now we need to copy this X script and put this into the first one, and we're gonna copy this Y script into this one. And the same thing in this other one, except we're gonna have the Y first and the X second. And now we have 4 empty slots here. So in here we're gonna have the complex sine operation. And if you don't know what sine is, well, you don't need to understand it because it's really complicated. It uses pi and things like that. Just put in sine in the second one and the last one, and put in cosine in the first one and the second last one. Well, this block is becoming very long, so let's go into motion, set X, and set Y. Gonna put this under here. I'm gonna drag everything in X into that and everything in Y into that. And now we can remove this go to XY. And now it's a bit simpler to look at. So if you have done everything right, it should look like this. And in here, we're gonna put this new camdir variable in all of them. And this camdir variable, we can make this into a slider. We can change this range from 0 to 360. So let's start here and look what happens if we zoom out of it. And well, this looks a bit weird. Why does it do that? That's because we need to set the rotation also. So set direction after the size here, 2 operators minus, and in here we're gonna put 90 minus camera direction. Oh right, before we start, we need to change this minus to a plus, because otherwise it will become really weird. So let's start. We can zoom out a bit and change this rotation. And yep, it works. Note that if we try to move the camera now, it's in the wrong direction. That's because the same we did with the camera zoom, we need to make to the camera rotation. We need to counter it. But I'm gonna let you figure out that one yourself. For now, I'm gonna show you a trick you can use to line up all the sprites, because in some games you will see that the sprites are a bit offset from each other. There's a little bit of a buffer. So what I like to do is go into events. When I receive message, make a message called pause for position. I used some dev tools to make that. And we're gonna drag everything in this forever under that. Now we can remove this forever. In this forever loop at the green flag, we broadcast pause. So this is gonna be completely the same, but everything is going to sync up exactly at the right frame. So that's everything in this tutorial. Here are the finished scripts, and take care. Bye bye.